Hello. This is weird. I don't know why the camera is not getting picked up by OBS. I thought it was maybe broken. Wait, the light's on now. Hold on.
I mean, I see you in Discord.
I know it's working for Discord, but it would not pick up in OBS. Let's see if now that it's on, because I don't think the light was on before. See if now that it's on, it will register as a camera even. No, it still doesn't. Weird. Whatever. I'll just stream Discord. This is gonna be annoying though. It's picking up everything else. La 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 la. Okay, good enough, I guess. Am I gonna have to buy a new camera though? Anyway.
Is it working?
I mean, it's working on Discord. I'm just streaming Discord, so it's fine. Talk again, though?
Hello.
Okay. Should be fine. You sound a little bit low.
I can move my microphone closer. It's a little closer. I just figured since we don't have a full group, we just talk about the best way to handle organizing this stuff, and we can talk a little bit.
The first
vision
question
for
to
it.
me is like, do we want to split this off into a separate repo? Because I do still want this repo that I've actually shared to be like the group every project repo, but I figure we can split it off after we get a basic prototype of everything we want in, so that stuff is still in the repo and before we start level design.
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice to clean this repo, or what we're working with, up. It has a lot of assets that don't need to be here, right? And it would be nice if we start to really focus on this to get rid of those extra assets.
Well, I figured that I would prefer that be done after we split it off into another project, because
Yeah, that's what I mean. We would, so yeah, I'm fine with like forking the project and then cleaning it up significantly. It would be nice, for sure. And also, we should look into using that Git large file format for the models, because the models, can be big.
I think so at what
Model,
point
and
do
by
you
models I
want?
mean the neural network models.
Yeah, I guess here's the question: is there anything else to be done to the? Is there anything else that you are going to do to your part of it? Because all my stuff is easy, right? I don't
Yeah,
really.
I want to that's actually part of the reason why I wanted to hop on a call, is because I want to talk about how I want to show you how it works currently. It's because this is like this works, but and it's pretty good, but it's not great. Like it's not where I think in the end we'll want it to be. I think it's like a close iteration of that. Um, but here, let me stream it, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. You probably want better text readability. Let's see if you can even read it. I know Discord streaming has really kind of shit the bed in terms of quality. Alright, so this stuff, the classifier stuff is pretty solid. I don't think this will change much. Um, but the rune stuff is what I wanted to really show you. So let me know when you're
I'm
watching and
watching.
you're
I'm looking at.
right. So I'll start you from the draw controller just so you get a full idea of how it works. So this is from drawing. So when you draw, it's gonna create a new line. Right now, it works based at just one stroke per classification, and I'm gonna change that to allow it to do multiple. But we can talk about that in a second. But first, let me just walk it through. So you'll draw a line. You click the mouse down, create a new line. You're gonna draw that line, and when it's done, when your mouse comes up, it's gonna classify it. So basically, it sends that active line to the classifier, and that is basically, and then the classifier takes it from there. The only this other stuff is just to clean up to get ready to draw a new line. Once the classifier has it, it is going to place the camera on at the position of the drawing. It'll have the grabber, which is just like it takes a picture of it using a spare camera, a orthographic camera.
So is this a camera that's visible to the player, or is this an invisible camera that's just for the drawing?
Invisible camera. It's this guy right here. It's just for the drawing. It's using orthographic camera because orthographic cameras are great for seeing shape. So orthographic cameras is this big square box instead of the like triangle they call it the truncated pyramid,
Yeah,
which is the perspective.
I used an orthographic. The first camera I ever used in this was orthographic because I wanted to make a nicer isometric game.
Yeah, basically the idea is things, regardless of how far away you are, you always appear the same size. Being further away from the camera doesn't make you smaller, like you would in a perspective camera.
I still don't
So
100% understand how that works with yeah, it's hard to even formulate my question without like pulling out a 3D
well,
environment.
like this is right now the scene camera is a perspective camera, right? So as I back away, this gets smaller and smaller and smaller.
I
But just
understand that part of it, but I guess the part I don't understand is how are still how are you if I draw across a sphere with an orthographic camera on, I don't understand how that makes it easier to like take an image and put it on like flatten it out basically.
it makes it so that like let's say if it was a really big sphere and I had a really big volume, like this went really far out, right? It makes it so that the line segments that are on the back of furthest from the sphere that are still visible aren't smaller than the line segments that are closest. So like if there's a line thickness issue, something like that, for example, like if I had if I was drawing on the capsule here, right? This line segment on a perspective camera, this part of the line will be thicker than the one all the way back here because this is further away. But on orthographic, the line segments look to be the same thickness.
That part I understand, but like if will this still work? And it's okay, it's totally okay if it doesn't. Will this still work if I'm drawing across, say I have a sphere and a hole in the ground, and I draw a big, I draw a line or square, let's say, that one of the lines of the square intersects both over the hill of the sphere and way down into the deep of the hole, and then comes out, and then I finish up the other 3 lines of the square on flat ground.
I'll just show you what it'll look like. So right, I'm gonna start on here, draw down onto here, right? That gives us a basic concept of what we're doing, right? It's a little weird because I don't have when I moved from the code there, from the networking code to this, I broke the piece that monitors the normals and make sure that each segment like looks like the normal looks, right? But basic idea here. So this is what you're gonna get with the camera, because the camera is just going to look straight down at this, and it's going to give you sort of this. Can I turn off the gizmo here? It'll give you this kind of view, but it's right now. So turn that gizmo back on.
I think
So right now you're getting slightly weird of a thing because you're only looking at a part of it because it's not averaging at the normal. Probably what I'd do for this, if I like the goal for this would be to probably do something. Sorry, hold on, I gotta figure out which axis I need to go over. It's the Z axis, I think. No, that is supposed to be the right one, but it must be the X. Okay. Something like this would be closer to what I need to fix, or something like that. Right, because ideally what I would do is I take the normals here, which I'm not doing yet, but I'll take the normals and I'll average them out across the image, and it'll just face the average of the normal.
Okay.
So it'll give you something. Ideally, it'll do something like that. That shouldn't be too hard to implement. It's just I don't have it implemented because, one, the normals don't matter anyway, because that part of the drawing is broken right now. The normals aren't updating properly. I had to fix that.
I get I get the concept of like this is going to make line thickness not matter, but I guess my question would be like, if I'm a player, I'm on the inside of a sphere, and I draw a straight line, all
the way around it?
All the way around, like it's just a perfect belt on the circle on the inside, right? Is that going to appear as a line, or is a circle or is it going to...
That's going to appear as a line. Right now what it does is it focuses on the...
That's maybe fine, right? Because
yeah, that'll appear as and that'll actually probably confuse the shit out of it, because like the way I imagine it is it aligning with these normals. Like this is a pretty good representation of what I want it to do. This is like a pretty good example because the normals kind of all align well enough here. In reality, it probably would be a little bit more like that is the image you'd get out, because this average coming down here would take some effect here. But like a 360, what it's doing is looking at all of the what would happen would be it would look at all of the first thing it does is, well, here, let me, you know what, let's look at the code. It's probably easy to show you. I can show you what the grabber is doing. It's not that complicated. So the grabber is going into, when it places the camera, when it actually sets position and size, it is going in through the line segments here, and for every point in the line segment, it is essentially adding them all up and then dividing them to get the average sort of position, so to get the middle of it. So that would place it, if you drew a sphere, it would place it exactly in the middle of that sphere. If you drew a ring, it would place it exactly in the middle of the ring. That's the placement part. And then while it's also doing that, I'm also finding the minimum and maximum for X, Y, and Z for that. That way I know how big I need to make this this box here. So it would be placed in the middle of that ring, of that circle, and then this volume for the camera would be made big enough to capture all of it. but then the angle of the camera isn't going to be smart enough to know that you're looking at a ring. So because the normals around the sphere are going to be pointing all at each other, they're actually going to even out and just make it face probably the way like face down or something, or whatever the default angle will be, which may be a ring or maybe a line, because all the normals will theoretically, because it's a sphere, average to 0, which will wind up being weird. That could actually be like a bug scenario where it doesn't know how to face.
So as long as, I mean, granted, we don't need, if it becomes too much of a hassle for the player to be able to draw over everything, you know, to be able to draw a circle across the whole world and have it account for all that.
Well, you could easily draw across the whole world. The problem becomes like specifically the sphere example is
Right,
an
that's
edge
why
case that's difficult.
so
Yeah.
like there's you know, inside of caves and things like that, we could just we could just not have caves, or B, you could write a you could you could basically write a thing that says like the the problem with the sphere is that the it's hard to find the right angle because there is no it is a perfect
You would essentially have to know
the X, Y,
that
and
you're in
Z.
the sphere, and you'd want to instead of looking at the sphere at the thing from like an internal angle, you'd want to actually pull it out. And like so like if we want it to look like a ring, you want, instead of placing the camera at the center of the ring, we'd want to place it at an offset of the ring
I think
and
we
look
don't, right?
towards
We
it.
want it to look like a line because if a
Well,
player like unless like yes, the sphere thing might be a weird, interesting extra puzzle, but just the thing I'm thinking of is like caverns, right? If someone draws on the wall of a cavern a little bit onto the wall and onto the ceiling, I think we want it to be I think it will give better results if it's looking at it as
I
in
mean, if we want it to look like a line, then it should still work just fine that way. As long as if they do a loop de loop, it's if they're not trying to draw a real symbol and just trying to draw a line, it's almost definitely going to give it a line. Um, but if they're trying to draw like, if I don't, I guess you can't even do that. Like if I'm trying to think of a scenario in which you're in like a circle. Like, okay, so if I tried to draw a symbol across this, the inside circle here, I don't think you could physically do that.
you would have to be literally in a sphere and just go and just swipe up for, and there'd have to be no, I guess, like, uh,
Camera lock
yeah.
kind of thing. It would be nearly impossible. And then like what the resulting image you're gonna get is going to, because of the way the normals are gonna even out for the most part, is gonna wind up only looking at that image from an angle. Like the volume is gonna wind up probably looking like the two lines are overlapped, but they're the same distance, so it's just gonna look like a thicker line. Um, we'll mess around and test that stuff. That stuff can all be worked out as we build. I think it's probably a good idea to build a cave and draw it. But like in the average case of like someone drawing on just, let's say, a flat surface, it's easy enough to do, right?
I want the world to
Um,
be relatively, like, I have a lot of open space like this. I should also do fog so we can not worry about the grass as much.
but you can see this thing has reshaped to fit the circle size, and we can do a um, larger space here, right? And now that has been, if I actually, it looks a little weird because we're not actually over it, but you can see, looking directly over it, it's resized to the shape of the square. What I'd like to do too is to recognize the angle that you're drawing from and try to do a y-axis correction for that, so that it kind of looks like this, instead of this. That because that's also how I'm
like what instead of what? Sorry.
like this, like it'll turn this way, kind of thing. Um,
Oh,
we'll
yeah,
see.
yeah, yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, yeah, okay.
Um, but and now obviously this, because I have actually set the square to recognize
You know
as
what you
a.
could probably, actually, I don't know if, so Cinemachine has a thing, you know, if you set up virtual cameras, I don't know if you could do this with an orthographic to a perspective camera, but it might actually be really neat if after the player drew something, like the animation for activating the spell was like a Cinemachine like lerp between two cameras. I don't even know what that would look like going between perspective and orthographic though. That might be neat.
Yeah, well, I mean, we could make a look. I imagine I will put some animations in here eventually just to show that they're active. Like right now, the only rune that actually activates is the square rune. It can be hard to get this guy in here because I turn off the gravity when I put it in here to make it nice and easy to float.
So wait, it's right now that square is cast this gravity spell on this, or you mean when you?
Yeah, anything inside the square has turned off the gravity and is doing I also put in a little manual float.
Ooh,
So
I
there's
originally had thought like maybe it just activates and it goes on one thing and then disappears, but actually I like that it's just sort of like an area that you can push other stuff into.
That's
That's
kind of how I imagine like we
that's
could do
yeah.
puzzle
Let's
solving this
yes
way,
yes absolutely. Let's do it that way. That is way better.
and it's kind of like a little bit fiddly, which makes it fun to, it's not perfect. And then
Draw a huge square right now and push it into it.
yeah. Right now too, because the lines don't go forever. Man, what a good square
That
I
was
did.
wow. That was nearly perfect. That was impressive.
Yeah, thank you. Um, yeah, because right now so you can draw so far away that it won't doing that what I just did breaks the algorithm. Um, just so that's something I also need to correct for because there's a drawing distance, which I think we'll still want. But I need to fix that too. Lots of small things to fix. All right, so I got to be careful because it does go no gravity and then it just kind of flies
Floats
away.
away. Yeah. Are
Yeah.
you applying a little bit of an upward force just to get it going?
So it does have an upward and downward force that is just to give it this float effect, just for the effect of showing you guys that it is working. Um, so it's working on a sine function right now, just
Oh, so
going up
it's
and
literally
down.
like just bobbing, like got
Yep,
it.
yeah, yeah.
So
And then
you
and
should keep
gravity's turned
that.
off.
You should keep that, and then honestly, you should just keep that,
And it works for me too. I also float.
and then apply nice, and then apply like if the
'Cause it's just a rigid body.
if any other force acts on it, I think to move it vertically in the up direction, you keep that float on it, but also like you have that. If there's no gravity on it, it'll just go forever, right? So any force applied on it just should be slowly lowered with maybe like a lerp over time.
Yeah, we can play around with it. It was just purely for the demonstration purposes. But all right, let's get back to showing you how it works, so you can start playing around too, and so we can talk about how to.
Hold on, Nico's trying to get my
Um,
attention. What?
yeah.
Um, yeah, you're fine. I am streaming. Okay.
All right. So the grabber, the image grabber is what I call it. Probably could have a better name, but basically it places the camera. It takes a picture using that camera, the orthographic camera. Places the camera, defines its dimensions, all that, does all the stuff to make sure that we get the drawing, um, and then takes an image for us. That's stored as a texture 2D. Then this infer method this is the actual classifier piece. I don't expect you to really mess around with this much. This is like the actual neural network model. Um, Basically what it does, essentially you give it an image and it's going to put out a list of integers, or actually floats, a list of float numbers, and picking the largest one represents the largest one is the index of that it thinks it is. So right now, so the order that I train them in, essentially the classes order that I train them in will matter. So I train them as the first class is circle, second class is square, third class is triangle. So that's going to be this way the outputs work too, and we'll just have to know that. That's something we're going to have to memorize, and as we add new classes, we'll have to account for that. So just something to keep in mind. But that should all be handled pretty easily with the rune type system. So we shouldn't. That'll really be something I have to worry about, not so much you. And then the last piece, so once it knows what rune type, it'll get a rune type out of that. So it just casts it as a type, which is rune types are defined here, which is just an enum that we can reorganize as we need. And then it'll just return that type. So now then once it has that type, it does something like a design pattern called like a factory pattern. So it goes to this thing called make rune. So I give it the type and the original drawing because we're gonna need that for a little later. But then there's a rune factory that just says get rune. So it's just gonna make us a rune based on the type and the drawing, and it's just a
Wait, rune fat. I don't. This part I don't understand. What is this function for?
so
Make rune.
the classify. So at this point, I know what type of rune I want, but I don't actually have it as a game object. This factory is a way of making similar game objects just with one line of code, but that are all technically different classes in their own sense. So I give it the type and I give it the drawing,
Oh, you don't
and
mean
it's
the rune. You mean the result of the rune, like the fire or the gravity field or the thing that's gonna have the collision trigger on it or whatever,
well the
right?
class. So in my mind, the rune is really it's a piece, right? It's a drawing and it's the what so it has the drawing and it's also some game object that is really the rune is a game object, right? That knows what drawings associated with it and also does some other stuff like the floating or whatever the effect is. Yeah, so it's the combination. The rune itself is a game object that stores a reference to the drawing
And an
and
indicator of
also
what the classifier said it was.
yeah, but in reality, it's just going to be a class itself. Oops. It'll just be its own class that represents that. So I'll show you in a so in the rune factory. This is like a dumb way to do a rune factory. There's supposed to be smarter ways. I just couldn't remember how to do them because I know you're not supposed to use a switch statement. Um,
Why?
because it can get really long, is what they say. Don't use a switch statement because every time you do a switch statement, you have to if you have like hundreds of classes, it winds up being super long, and it's supposed to be a dumb way. There's a better way to do it, but for now, we'll just use this, and I'll fix it later.
Honestly,
But
I
basically,
don't see there being more than like if we're because of the interactions between these things are
will be
going to be
complicated.
complicated. I don't see there being a lot more than you know at least maybe I was aiming for 6 to start. I think 12 would be a lot. I think 8 would be doable. I think 10
It
would also be a
depends,
lot.
right? The levitate thing is all physics based, so it doesn't really matter.
That's
Its interactions
true.
are normal, right? So I think we can play around with it but you're right. There will be like a fire rune, and that'll have lots of interactions that we'll want to mess around with. Um, so yeah, who knows? But yeah, so basically, all the factory does is based on the type in the drawing, it creates a new game object because we need a game object to represent that rune in the world. It just names it rune because I just want to have it. And then basically, based on the enum that you have, it's going to create or add a component, and it'll add a component circle, square, triangle, or I had fizzle here just as I was thinking of other things. And those are classes that inherit the rune base class, which is this. And
Okay.
that rune base class is just something that stores the drawing, has a method called activate. So all of them will have a method called activate. And right now, all that does is just print the name, so I know that I got the
So
right
I don't
thing.
know about. This is getting into areas that the syntax and stuff I'm not sure about. So when it inherits that class, does that mean every time I use the circle class, would it be a class? The circle or the square or the triangle, that it has to have those same parameter inputs as
So
the.
basically, it means yeah. So it means that a circle will have a a drawing. So the circle and because the circle inherits is a child or a subclass of rune, circle will already without you having to define it in circle. I actually have an example here in the square. Um, let's actually just talk about it in the square. Even though I don't define rendered line or drawing in square, it'll have drawing in it
Right,
because
right.
it inherits from rune. And even though I don't define the method activate in square, it'll have an activate method in square because it's defined in rune. It's superclass. It's
So
parent
the
class.
rune was made up of game object and drawing, right? Those were the two inputs.
So rune is really just a mono behavior. It winds up just being, it's pretty much just a component, like you would add a rigid body. Is That's all it is. And when I inherit from it, this circle is also just a component, but it's a component that will have this stuff in it by default, no matter what. So when you're making new runes, like let's say you want to make, right now I only have an implementation for the square rune. I have these other ones here, but that doesn't do anything. They don't do really anything interesting. They just do implement this stuff. But if you wanted to make a circle rune, you could make a new file, make circle.cs, make a public class circle rune, just like you would any other custom component you would make, and then you will know that because it's inheriting from rune, your circle will automatically have the drawing associated with it. So if you ever need to reference the original drawing for any reason, you can reference it in drawing, and it'll already have an activate method that will be called when you when you uh, when it's classified. So you can override this activate method if you want to do custom shit. So you know that automatically the classifier is going to activate it, and we can change how this works. It may not be activate. I was just trying to test it, but for example, if we wanted them to automatically trigger their effects right away, always, but maybe you didn't want it to, or maybe you want to do something fancy when the rune's activated, like maybe you want to play a specific effect or something when the circle rune's activated, you could override activate and add your new code to
By
that. So it
by
would
just
be,
putting in by just putting a activate function in
yeah,
the.
you just, if I wanted to do it here, I would just do @override void activate, right? And then
Here's my
I think it
question.
would
So
just be.
the rune type, so the public static get rune there, it has rune type and rune render line drawing, right? So the rune type, if I instantiate something that's a circle rune, right, and it creates that subclass, what is the type? What is the automatic type there? Are they is it the same for the circle, square, and triangle, or like
So
what?
So the underlying types of all these are just mono behaviors. That's all they are. Because they inherit from rune, which inherits from mono behavior. The type here just is what's coming out is just this enum here. It's what's coming out of the classifier to tell me what it was classified as. And then the type here just tells me which class I'm going
Okay,
to
so
make.
so if I had a thing that was just looking at all game objects on the map that were active right now or something, and I looked to see if they were runes, and then I also wanted to see what type of rune they were without knowing that from within that same script, I could reference the type.
Yeah, so you could do, if you want to look at all runes, you should be able to, because it's based, you should be able to get type, or like is type rune, it should be true for circle, square, triangle, and fizzle, for any rune type, anything that's made through this
Okay, but
method.
I wouldn't be able to tell without. But I wouldn't necessarily be. I would be able to tell that they're a rune, so they're not the player, they're not the ground, whatever. They are, but I would not be able to tell what if they were a. I would reference the drawing, I guess, the drawing thing
Well,
to.
you could also check if they're circle, square, triangle, or fizzle. Like the benefit of the type of this inheritance model is you could check it's both a circle and a rune and a mono behavior, right?
Okay,
So
okay,
it's all three of those. So you could check if it's a circle, and you'll get all circle runes. You could also just check if you were looking for any active rune, you could check for a rune. So for example, if we're looking for one of the rune types will be the connector type, right? Something like that. And if we want to just see if the game object that it's touching is a rune, all we have to do is check if it's type rune. We don't have to check for type circle, square, triangle.
gotcha.
So that's like a pretty good example of the benefit of this system. Um,
Coming back, sorry.
yeah, that's okay. Yeah, but so essentially, yeah, I'm not sure why maybe I just might not remember the override syntax here. Public void. Why
Might
is it
just
not
be
modify? Public must precede the member type and name. It does. Activate. This is a method. Square.activate hides inherent member. Rune.activate use the new keyword if hiding was intended.
just says public. The example on the Unity documentation is public override void blank, whatever the name
Oh,
would
I
be.
had to maybe I had to write override in here. Public override.
Public override void, or presumably also private override void. I don't know if the private would work actually.
Oh, okay. So I just have to mark this as virtual. There you go.
Yes, it also does have that, but I didn't know if that
And
was.
then I can't have this in here because I believe modified virtual is not valid for this item. Method must have a return type. Virtual void. There you go. Can I put this here? I wonder. It looks like that might work. And then there we go. Okay, so that's how you'd override it. So if you want, so like, then I think I could do super.
So will you leave virtual in there now from now on?
I just have to. I needed it in the abstract class.
I don't know what that
Does
means.
it say? Does the Unity instructions say how to get the super version so you can still execute the original shit? I guess we could just make it activate and just let us decide on our own. Unity.
Um,
I just want to see if I can. Oh, base. They call it base. C#. There we go. Base dot.
method name.
Yeah, method name activate. Okay, so there you go. So that's how we would do it. Yeah, there we go. That's what we want. So yeah, so this would be an example of like, hey, if I wanted the activate to like, in my mind, I imagine activate like turns it on, right? And maybe it doesn't trigger its effects yet, but it does say, okay, hey, look, I'm classified and I'm ready to go. And then like maybe if you wanted to do some other stuff before when you activate, so like I can imagine us having a bool in here saying like public bool, activated, and then having activate set that to true or something. There's other stuff. So actually one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this is so this square class, right? Right now I'm doing everything in code. So I create the collision box, I create the box collider, and do all the shit in code. But I thought, oh yeah, that's a really elegant way to do it. Don't have any other resources hanging around and yada yada yada. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought it might be more familiar and also easier for us if I allowed it to use prefabs for these. So we would make a square prefab and then just instantiate the square prefab, and then on activation we would just update all, like for example the collision box and the target, and all that other shit. Prefabs are on one hand good because they let us test them outside of having to use all this shit, right? Um, you can test shit easily.
But
Uh, But the downside is you have all the resource garbage, right? Prefabs are kind of a pain in the ass, can be a pain in the ass to work with, especially when we're both working on them at the same time in Git. And also you just have to have a prefab for every single thing. Um, and also like prefabs, when you're trying to modify stuff in here, you have to remember that no, I need to go modify it in the prefab, not in here. Like you can't, like
we
the
can just do it
variables that
all
you
in code because it's gonna be referencing back to the drawing thing always anyway, right? It's always gonna be getting the way I'm picturing it, like let's just take fire as an example, right? It's triangle for fire. We draw a giant triangle on the ground, and basically what I would say is then, like, depending on the size of the triangle, you map that to where that is on the terrain and figure well,
So you'll
hmm,
have the drawing, and I think from the drawing you can get everything you need, but I think I should put in some convenience variables in here of like the minimum x, minimum y, minimum z, max x, max y, max z of the drawing, just so that you don't have to go back and get it from the drawing. You can just get it from you, like you'll know it's part of. For example, if I add that here and just as part of my setup, I set those variables, then in Square you'll just have access to that. You know, I could just tell what the size of my shit is straight from the size of the drawing is straight from Square without having to go back to the drawing to get it. Um, that's other stuff that we should talk about of like what variables do we think that we'll want right at hand right here. Like we could always go back to the drawing itself, and the drawing is just essentially a list of points, and you can just get you can get the middle of it, you can get the size of it, you can all that stuff if you want from the drawing. Or would it be nice to just should we put that stuff in a separate variable here so that
Let
you can just
me
access it immediately?
let me find, where the hell did I save this? Fuck. I wanted to find my notepad file for the so what were the spells that when we were still trying to do this for Ludum, what were the spells? I had 6 spells. There was fire, float, what else?
We can do fire, we can do float. I imagine like an open or reveal spell, something that like shows something that shows what's hidden. So like if you use it on something blocking a hidden entrance, you could open that entrance.
I'm down for that, but
Um,
I wouldn't want to do it like, oh, here's all the hidden spots in the world. I would want it to be more organic in the way that like, it's just make this make make the mesh render slightly transparent, or show certain objects. Um, um, you know how when you go behind a tree in some games, they show a silhouette of you, right? Like, or like
mm,
show the silhouette of all non-terrain game objects behind this thing. I like the spirit of that, but I'm and I do love in Zelda when you put a bomb against a wall and it blows up and there's just a thing
like
there.
doo-doo-doo-doo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool, but I think doing it in a way where it's like I don't know, where it's more integrated into the I want to use the physics system and just the systems of Unity, and not just if statements, like if there is a hidden thing here, then do this. Like
Mm.
but yes, we could do a spell like that for sure. Um, so that's all those examples. Let me think of any more, any outliers, any that are weird. So like the one when we were, I don't know if this is still going to be a game about automating a farm necessarily, because that was more of a good idea for the game jam. I still think that's animate, bring things to life. Make
Mm.
things make I definitely want that to be a thing. Like bring a thing to life and have it walking around the map with like billboarded googly eyes in front of it. And I wanted to learn to use navmesh, and you said it was easy enough, so cool.
Yeah, it's super easy. Yeah, I need to. There are a couple things I need to do that of like for the drawing. I need to get. I was thinking about just ditching the line render, the built-in Unity line render altogether, and trying to do it myself so that we have a little bit more control over it. But like in that sense, I need to get the normal stuff working so that as you draw across certain different normals, it looks right. I need to get the we decided that we want multiple strokes, right? So I need to allow you to do multiple strokes before the classification occurs.
So that's what that part of it, we should talk about it. You can keep going, but we should talk about
Yeah.
that.
And then the other thing I need to do is the moving the drawings with the object that it's attached to, um, which is partly why the line render is bad, because the line render, if you move that object, or if you move it as an object, it doesn't move with the object itself, because the line render is just a set of points. Unless you're updating those points, you can move the line render object all day, it's not going to move.
So
um
here's a scenario where that matters, right? you draw the bring things to life symbol over two things and the ground between them, right? Then those things get up and start walking away, and ideally we want the parts that are drawn on them to stay with them, right? That's the sort of thing
Mm.
you're talking about. I guess like the cheeky solution everyone always has to this sort of thing is like parent the thing to the object, but I don't think that works in this
That doesn't
scenario.
work for our scenario now because we have inline, literally drawn in-world stuff. We could go back to trying to mess with drawing as part of the texture, like literally redrawing on the texture, but that didn't work great because a lot of textures wrap in a way and repeat their segments
Well,
in
what
ways you don't realize.
for the terrain, it doesn't matter, right? That's never gonna move. I don't think so, at least. Um,
Nah.
so like, um, for the terrain, I think the way we're doing it now works. But what you could try and do in that scenario is, um, once those things start moving, you just make a slightly bigger than the mesh renderer of the thing that you brought to life, collision box, and if any of the points of the lines are colliding with that, it 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 removes them, and then it figures out how to draw what would be drawn on it on the texture, but that might be really complicated, and we don't
Yeah,
have.
that could be really complicated. The easiest way I'm thinking would be to just split up line segments based on the object that is being hit at the time. So, for
Yeah,
example, and my rendered line class instead will now have some sort of dictionary, um, and anytime a new game object is hit while you're drawing, it'll add that game object's ID to the dictionary, and the key will be the list of points that correspond to that game object. Um, There'll need to be a little bit more. It'll need to be a little bit more complicated because you could go on an object, off an object, and then back
so
onto that object.
maybe that's a reason to do the one single. You have to do one single draw line, because that gets way more complicated when you can stop drawing and start drawing again.
Yeah, like also we may should talk about like is it worth the effort of having those lines stay on there, or would it be a more fun game to let people draw multiple lines? Because like if you look at there is a big drawback of not being able to use multiple lines. If I go over here, I don't even know what I'm reloading right now. Probably saved something I shouldn't have. If I go over here and I want to draw a square around this, like it's kind of hard to do. Like, okay, now what do I do? I gotta like try to keep my point steady and move around, and then now I'm getting floated, and it winds up doing this crazy shit, right?
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't look good.
Yeah, it should be multiple lines. It's probably not worth it to
Yeah,
have the things brought to life and the multiple things keep their lines on them. Once they come to life,
we could probably figure it out eventually. It just shouldn't be our main focus,
it can also
you know?
just be that for some runes, the more complicated ones like this, you do it and it disappears, right? It's not a zone like the float thing. It's just a different kind of rune, right?
Yeah, yeah, we can. Yeah, that is true. Yeah, that actually would make. And then maybe we could just put like. Then at that point we could do if we store we could either like store the mesh or we could turn it into a mesh because you can do that with the line renderer. Just make it go from a line renderer to a mesh, and then like I don't know if we could like minimize it as an image and then literally print it on a like as a tattoo on them, a small version of what you drew as a tattoo somewhere on them, kind of like Majin Buu style, right?
Sure.
I don't know if you remember that
I do.
from
I remember
previously,
Majin Buu. I remember
right?
the
You could do a
M's.
little Majin Buuing of them, right? And just have them have a. Maybe we don't do as maybe we do it so as literally as simple as okay, we have a standard version of that symbol that
I
we're gonna
mean,
use. We're not gonna copy your
i-
drawn version.
if you if this was a multiplayer game, I think the Majin Buu thing neat, because then you like maybe you give a slightly different color or something for each player, but this is not going to be a multiplayer game. So I think the Majin Buu, if we had a diegetic reason in the world to do it, that's cool. But like the real benefit of keeping the things on them to me is if this is a puzzle survival game, um, puzzle farming game, right? The puzzle, there could be cool puzzles of like, I drew this symbol across several things and now it's broken, and maybe and now I want to draw a new symbol based on what's already drawn there on the things that are now running around, like to
Yeah.
cast a new spell. So like maybe you could have spatial puzzles based on that, but that's like a way pie in the sky thing. I think we could keep the functions. So Tunic Tunic taught me, I think, really that like you don't have to have a super complex system underneath to make the puzzles engaging. If you just like, there's an element of puzzle design where just like, if the whole game is the tutorial and learning what the puzzle even is, then like those could be the type of puzzles we do for this game. I'm very inspired by Tunic to like do a spell book version of Tunic what Tunic did. I do think there's some crossover we could have where it is like half and half, like part of it is just like the puzzles are spatial and based on how literally what you can draw on and when and where, and then the other half of it is like what like figuring out that you can even do these spells from the spell book, how to draw on something
Yeah.
and make something even happen. And I honestly think the second part of that might be the more engaging, could be the more engaging thing, if we want to just keep the effects of the spells relatively simple. And I'm fine for that. Like, it doesn't have to be, we don't have to have a contingency for every scenario. It could be a relatively simple thing that like that. Just that is so cool. Like, just what you're doing right now is really neat and will lead to a lot of things. I think
You
like
could make like a you could make like a volleyball game, like a floating game here. We could make a court out of this. I'm trying to figure out right now what happens when I draw, because I
another
didn't test
square.
this. Another square in here probably breaks. It does recognize that as a square. No, it doesn't seem to break. Interesting. I wonder if it's because it's going with the sign of the world, so all things, you know what? Probably I bet you all things sync up, so it doesn't matter right now. So I bet you the levitation syncs because I'm just doing the delta time, or the fixed time of the world. Yeah, it looks like they're syncing to me. Yeah, should probably change that so that things float at different cadences.
What happens when you draw? I'm not saying right now. I'm saying in our design doc. What happens when you draw a fire symbol inside of a float symbol? And because that's what I mean. Like, are
Those
we gonna?
interactions should be interesting. Yeah,
The,
so like then at that point, does fire spell just generate a flame ball object
I
that
think
can be?
so, because right now
Yeah,
right now the way the grass removal, which is the main thing I see fire being used for, and like plant removal, uh, it, it just works by converting the point of some collision line that you do with a raycast in the world to the terrain stuff, and then it removes that terrain. So it can't be super precise unless I change the dimensions of the terrain, but I don't think it needs to be super precise to remove the grass. It can be rough.
yeah,
But like we could just we could just create an object that always drops and is the fire, and it just casts that thing down wherever it is, and then it makes little babies of itself. But I think maybe if you put it in the float thing, it it floats up and then it can move around, and and maybe it'll come down somewhere and burn the grass. I don't know, but I think your only way to move fire, fire moves by propagating itself, but I think the interaction of the float spell and the fire spell is you can move an individual instance of fire.
yeah. I mean, you could do some cool stuff. Right now, it doesn't work this way. Like, but I'd love to, like, if you drew a square on this wall like this, it just right now it just works vertically always. But it'd be cool if it worked on the normal. So
That
like
would be
if it
awesome.
pushed me out, so then you can make these like conveyor belts
Yes,
of influence.
that would be amazing. It could also cast. It could also. So does it? We could probably do like just a shader that has a like magical effect in a beam going out essentially forever from that thing, right?
Yeah, there should be. You could do a shader that creates a pillar here and have maybe some particle effects,
Yeah,
a
right.
particle emitter that goes that way too. Um, probably the easiest is just to start with a particle emitter, but we could also do a shade. I do want to work on shaders, and I think if I do decide to replace the line renderer, it'll
I mean,
be a
particle
just
emitter's
basically
super easy to
switching.
work with. We can just
Yeah.
start with that. That's simple enough. I can do that.
Yeah, my goal for this is like, we get just a proof of concept and throw it on the internet and see if anyone's interested in paying us some money to do it full time.
You know what I
Yeah.
bought during that last sale also is a thing that can cut meshes into two meshes. We could try throwing that in here
Yeah, we could do like
with the
a
trees.
decompose or something one that could be neat. There could also be like a grow and shrink spell.
Yes, that was. I think
Um,
that was something I had on my original list because I wanted the little dudes you made to be. I wanted you to be able to make a giant one who would step on all the little ones on accident and smush them.
mhm. Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff. There's a lot of opportunity here. I have to do a lot of cleaning up for the drawing stuff to get it to be where it needs to be, but it is as promised. And I wanted to show you this stuff or the code so that mainly you could start working on if you were interested, you could start working on some of the other effects while I clean shit up.
Sure.
Um,
So here, when do we want to split the project? Because basically, you should tell me when you're ready to do that. When you think the system is,
Once I get
ready.
the drawing better, probably. I want at very minimum the normals need to change, right? The normals need to, as you draw, need to correct themselves across multiple surfaces, and so I got to go back. I had that working before. I just broke it when I moved it over from network to non-network somehow.
Also, you should
But
put a thing in. It seems like right now when we were showing me the example of like how it's hard to draw around corners, basically, like
mhm.
you started floating for a second and then you like drew a line. It looked like you drew a line kind of pretty far from you because your mouse like position changed due to the floating. So if
Yeah.
there's not right now, you should limit the distance at which you can draw the lines. That should be pretty
Yeah,
simple.
there is a limit. It just has to be defined. It's a parameter we can tick up and down. It might even be on the draw. It might be in here.
Ooh,
Draw
there could be
controller.
a thing where there could be a thing that there could be like a teleport
Yeah, draw
your.
distance.
What
Yeah.
about what about a field that just duplicates your drawing in the nearest field that it is the same type as it. So you draw two squares and then when you walk next to square A and draw a triangle in it, it also draws a triangle in zone B. So in that way you can do like you can
That could
draw
be
across the
interesting.
world, right?
Yeah, that could be super complicated, but super interesting. There's like that. There's some really neat puzzle design that could lead to. Like when you if you need to do something like yeah, let's like a very simple example of, oh, I need to place this orb here at the same time, but I can't be in two places at the same time. Like I need to place these two duplicate orbs in a place at the same time.
Or
um
I'm sorry to interrupt, but like this just sprung. So there's a mountain. It's surrounded by it's surrounded by lava, right? So you can't reach it to climb to the top of it. So on the wall there, you draw or on something that you can reach, you draw the teleporter symbol, and then you do the float. Or maybe you're on top of something, you need to fall down. So and it's not safe. That's a simpler example, right? So
mhm.
you on something that you can reach, you draw the teleporter thing, and then you draw the float symbol on this part that's safe, right? And then it creates a float symbol where you need to land, right? That
Yeah,
sort of
that'd be
puzzle.
cool. Yeah, that'd be super neat. Yeah, there's
Ooh,
a lot
that's
of opportunities. There's a ton of the lava mountain is actually kind of a really neat example of like some cool design we can do because obviously they can't draw on lava, right? And if you want to just use if we make sure the mountain isn't surrounded by any walls, it's just a like a lava moat mountain in the middle. You can't use the levitate spell just to get over there. if the levitate spell only goes up a certain
Right.
distance, we can make it design it so that you can't, so you have to do something more clever to get across that gap. Um, could be interesting.
If we're gonna do the horizontal, you could presumably make yourself a horizontal vertical staircase, right?
Yeah, but that's what I was saying. That there's no walls surrounding it. Like no walls close enough that you could draw the horizontal thing close enough to to push yourself across.
Oh,
That's
you're on the
definitely like,
outside of the thing trying to get. I'm
yeah,
thinking
you're
so.
on the outside. That would be a good way to get back. Yeah, but getting to it, like that should be like a set of puzzles that we make is okay, first time you have to cross water or lava, you need to, you need to do that trick where you make a upward levitate and then a wall levitate pushing you across, um, or something like that.
Yeah.
And then there's uh, but then that does not work anymore when you add that, then you have to change your tactics when you get to that part. There's a neat set of progression of puzzles.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I'll focus on the normal stuff and getting multiple strokes in first. I'll get those in. But basically, if you wanted to make I have a pretty like a little. God, I have so many projects open. Um, a little summary in the rune class, rune.cs. So one, define your rune type as an enum. So if it's not already defined, define it as an enum. Two, add your rune type to the switch statement of the factory method. So if it's, if circle, square, and triangle are already here, so you won't have to do that. But if we decide to obviously add new ones, that's what you do it. And then three, create the class for your rune, overriding the appropriate methods. So down here, I have them all created because they need to be referenced here to be able to,
So
obviously
again,
be
I
listed.
asked this before, but is that gonna work, or do I have to put virtual or something? You did something with putting virtual before, so you're gonna
So, well,
leave
this is
virtual.
virtual here. So if you want to override the activate method, all you have to do is do it was public because it has to be the same type. It has to be the same level of accessibility. It'll be public override void activate. So basically copy the method definition here, the method declaration,
And just put
and
override.
replace virtual with override.
Right.
Yeah, and that'll work. Um, but yeah, that so
I can try the
uh,
fire. I think okay, it's two
if you want to make
things.
triangle fire, then just literally just make a triangle
So
class.
here's the
And
next here's a sort of like a step back question is like do we want the runes to be actually two things here. The how complicated should the runes be to draw? Like how involved should they be? Like all zigzaggy, crazy rune looking things, or like when is that gonna matter? Actually, is I guess is the question. I guess we're as long as we have this model that's already trained on these simple shapes. So how many simple shapes do we have available to us right now?
right now, I only have triangle, circle, square. I just was testing different things, and like square and triangle. It was being able to distinguish between, and it should still do it pretty well. So like triangle here, right? Should get that as a. Oh, hold on. Sometimes this does happen, and I don't know why it happens. I'll have to debug that. But sometimes the worker breaks. Something we'll have to figure out. But just restart the game if that happens. If you get something, if you draw and it gives you that null reference exception, for whatever reason, sometimes the classifier just stops classifying because it doesn't have the worker that does the classification. Figure that out later. Anyway, this should be a triangle, which it is. Yeah, so triangle, triangle. Yeah, circle, circle. It classifies all these pretty well, and like triangle and a circle classification of that should actually be pretty hard conceptually, right? Because
I was gonna say it might be
the
easier if we train it on if we make some really so there's two things, right? It might be easier to train it with a smaller data set on some on relatively complicated symbols. The other option is we do a thing with like where you draw the things in relation to each other or so like it's just combinations of these two or three or four basic symbols that make the different spells.
I was thinking stroke count should matter. So like you could have a triangle drawn in one stroke versus a triangle drawn in two stroke. Like the better example was the Triforce, right? So here's you could draw a Triforce like this in two strokes, or you could draw a Triforce like this, right?
In
In
3.
three strokes.
That
Right?
is interesting. I like that.
Yeah.
So maybe we just do. Maybe we just
But
do
that being
simple.
said, this classifier works pretty damn well, and it can distinguish between a square and a triangle with no problem at all. And like that's hard. Like if you think about it, the difference between those things, it's like the circle and every other thing is easy because circle is rounded edges, but these are straight edges, and the difference is just the number of straight edges and the angles between them. So those being two. Like I don't think you could do the difference between a square and a fucking um like a I don't know, parallelogram, right? That thing.
Yeah.
That's always gonna be
I don't think we'll
like,
need to, right?
yeah.
So what is your
But
preference? Do you think we should do simple symbols with a where the stroke count matters, or do you think we should just do a unique retrain the model on a unique data set of more complicated and more visually different from each other symbols so that it can maybe pick up a little uh, so that things like the
I'd like
square and
the symbols to be just not like I'd like it if the symbols can't be guessed by you just drawing around, or can't easily be guessed by you just drawing randomly. I'd like there because then it ruins the surprise of discovering a symbol. So I'd like symbols I think that are a little bit more complicated. We can still have stroke count matter in that, like we can still have that be a different system. Like maybe drawing the same symbol in less strokes makes it more powerful or gives it a different sub
yeah,
effect or
yeah,
something.
that would be cool.
Um, but I'd like it so that like I don't want some people just going in there drawing all the basic shapes and then getting access to everything right away and like yeah that's cool and fun but then you kind of ruin the rollout of like discovering and then discovering a new symbol isn't as
I do
exciting.
think that's fine, and that works better with the redstone line thing
Yeah.
too. So like, so yeah, the although yeah. So I'm down with that. So then my next question was gonna be, I keep getting derailed, so let me just focus here.
We had
The
something that we wanted to talk about more immediately, right? It was the thing that you said we need to talk about this, but then I went on to show you how to make
it,
your own
I think it
thing.
was
What was it?
I think was it the redstone line thing?
No, it was something else. It was something more relevant, more like fundamental, and I can't remember what it is now. Um,
It's on
what
the
was
stream,
it?
so we can always go back if we don't remember. But oh, we might have already talked about it. Wasn't the interactions between the symbols or something?
Uh, I Ooh, that's gonna be weird. That still comes up as a square probably because of the blocky shape. Um, that'll be another thing that needs to be addressed eventually is the misclassifying things. Really, as long as I don't think it'll matter so much as long as we are clear that hey, in
Oh,
this
that's
world,
what about
slightly
a?
off things could be classified incorrectly by the world, by the gods or something,
Yeah, that's
or
fine.
whatever.
That's fine.
And then just make really good distinguishing activation effects of like, okay, the circle's always blue, the square is always red, and that's how you know if you got it right or something. Um, what fucking was it though that we were trying to talk about?
Um, I can't remember. I thought it had. I thought. Hmm. Yeah, I can't remember. I can go back. Hold on.
I don't know. Was it the stroke thing? Maybe it wasn't that. I don't think it was that. Well, it must have been something that we were talking about recently about in the chat, right? Or in the text, those text messages.
If you go back to the your code, it might jog my memory because I'm pretty sure you were showing the code when that.
I was like giving a list of things that I needed to fix, and it was the normals, it was the stroke count thing, the multiple stroke thing. It
Maybe it was
was
multiple strokes then, if we should have multiple strokes or not.
it was the What was it? What there was something else that needed to be fixed too, right? Normals, multiple strokes.
Um,
I can't remember. We'll just have to figure it out. Maybe we did cover
whatever.
it.
It's on the stream. I'll
Yeah,
figure it
we
out.
can text about whatever it is. But
So the things I want to work on next with this is I'll make a fire make the fire rune work. Basically, I'll create a rune for. So we only have 3 symbols right now that the model is trained on. So let's do float. Relatively simple stuff. Float, fire, and I would like to try if I can. I'm pretty sure I bought this. I bought so many things over Christmas on Unity, but I'm pretty sure I bought a thing that cuts meshes. So I wouldn't mind that being the third one, because I think that if we could get that working with the stuff in this world, the question is like, what happens when the player draws that on a mountain? I guess. But like,
yeah, I mean, we could
because I
let
want everything to work on everything. So that
Yeah,
like.
I do agree that everything should work on everything. We could let them cut the mountain in half, I guess, as long as but it is yeah, it could get weird.
But the mountain has no rigid body. I guess I could make it give it a rigid body after the cut, and then just see what happens. But
Yeah, obviously
that
also
cut
the
that
float
but
like this building doesn't have a rigid body, right? So it's not gonna float. This doesn't have a rigid body, presumably, right? It's not gonna float if I
so this so no, none of that has rigid bodies. Maybe save that one for later then. What should the third spell be?
I mean we could do shrink and grow, those are
Shrink and
pretty
grow is
easy.
simple. Yeah, let's do
Yeah.
that.
So we could do shrink or I don't know, maybe grow is shrink is probably easier because then you don't have to worry about uh, where the stuff goes when you grow it.
I
Like
want to do like an inventory system so that stuff like that jar and the buckets and whatever that you can move around and stuff can be used as containers. I want to make the trees grow fruits and stuff like that will be your reagents. And what was the last thing?
There's lots of stuff to work on. Yeah, there's if we do want though, we could also talk to Jeff, the graphic designer, and see if he wants to like draw some temporary symbols for us to classify. Basically, what I did to for these ones is I did, I think 100 of my own drawings of each symbol. And there's a class in here to do that for us. I have that set up. So if you wanna, if we want to do that, you just go into the draw controller, and in the image grabber here, there's a save to disk
You know what might be a good
thing.
thing to get everyone like jump started and passionate about working on this is maybe we sit down in the next couple weeks, and because the drawing of the symbols is both an artistic exercise, and what we choose as the symbols also has a technical aspect that you are the one who is the most familiar with. So like we should all get together, design the symbols, and then maybe starting to design the like the pages of the book and how they're revealed and in relation to the symbols and what puzzles that will correlate within the world. I think that will get Dave excited and Jeff excited about working on something like this.
Yeah, I would very much like to get like get
Like the
the
book is,
pages of the book stuff.
yeah, the book is the thing we work
stuff
on
working.
together, right? The book is the thing
Yeah.
that where all of our where the design and the code and the art and everything all intersects,
The
and it
book
is
stuff is
the
kind of neat. I really want to, even if like I wasn't like, so I don't know how discovering symbols works in this game. Like in the other game, I was thinking, oh, you would see them in the constellations, like which is cool. Probably a little difficult to do, but we'll figure it out eventually. Um, but like that, and then I imagine the book is like literally instead of having to write it down in the real world, you can just write the shit down in the book. So like I imagine you being able to type in the book just so that you have clean text, and then also being able to draw. So like you would draw your symbol in the book, and then write like, okay, this is how you cast a spell. Like it needs to be done under, or like activate this rune, it needs to be drawn under moonlight. Uh, you know, um,
But how do you, I guess my question is like, how do you
oh,
originally get the information of what the symbols to draw? Like, we should talk about that as a group, I think.
yeah,
But
maybe it could be something as simple as like, oh, you start in a cave and maybe there are some cave drawings just for basic example. But yeah, it should be more diegetic and interesting than that.
yeah, the
Um,
cave drawing thing is I would be down for, because I was gonna say like you could literally be finding the pages of the book like Tunic in the when we were doing the
hmm.
jam version, but I would like to come up with a more original thing. Like, yeah, they're
I,
drawn
I think the
somewhere.
star thing is cool as hell if we could get it working. I just
We
think it might be a little difficult.
so the
Like
star
every
thing is
night there's
cool,
a
but
different constellation.
if every so but like the star thing is very cool. I think the in Necro Skull it's cool, but it would work better if like, oh, all the things that are under the moon you can see in the stars, and there's different constellation every night, right? But like for a
Hmm.
game like this where the symbols I think are gonna be more limited, like once you that's cool the first time, right, when you figure that out. But then like you're basically just waiting for the game to hand you the next one on the next night, right
Yeah,
after
that's
that.
true. Like maybe actually we tie these symbols to like maybe there are inherent natural thing. So like, okay, you get the symbol, the rune that is activated by moonlight in the constellations. You get the rune that's activated by sunlight in the clouds. You get the rune that's activated by fire in some sort of
In volcano,
lava
yeah, right.
environment. And like maybe there's something a little bit more natural to it, which makes exploring more exciting.
Yeah, I'm down for that.
Um,
I think that's a better way to go for a game like this. But we can talk about that. I don't wanna like talk about it too much, because I want to talk about that as a group.
Yeah. All right, one more before I forget. The grow in size one could be like in a tree, like by foliage, like a bunch of trees. If you
There's
go
just
up
a
to the
big
top of
tree,
the
right? There's
mountain,
just a real big tree that's way bigger than all the other trees, and right, it has that symbol drawn on it somewhere when you climb relatively to
yeah,
the top of it or
drawn on, or
something.
like if you like go to the top of the mountain, it's like branches and bushes create that symbol, like look like that kind of thing. Like if you look at it from the right angle, you'll see that symbol and you'll be like kind of maybe like a witness style thing of like obviously you're not gonna draw over it, but you will be able to identify that symbol from the right angle. Something like that would be cool. Probably hard to design.
Right on. Well, yeah,
Because I want them to be more primal than instead of like, and because that would be like, oh, someone drew it on this tree to make it
that
that
was gonna be
big.
my next question. Is there in the fiction of the world, is there like a race of wizards that lived long ago, and you're seeing their symbols drawn on things and trying to have, and that gives you the hint to what they are? Or is it like yeah, it's like from the gods, right? Like the all the big trees are in a circle, and they're the only trees that are like that, and then you have to realize that, okay, they're all in this big circle. What happens if I draw a circle or something? It's gonna be
Yeah, yeah,
something more
exactly.
complicated in the end, but like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep,
I
yeah.
like that. I like that. I'm down for that idea. Like
I like it being more. Yeah, I like it being more in world like that. More like
it's just
Yeah,
like
I don't know.
you go to a bunch of landmarks, and it's like, here's a weird thing that exists nowhere else. Like what is where's the symbol, where like
Yeah,
if we
yeah,
do a relatively simple one first, and then like something relatively obvious, like I think having them all, I think that's witness enough without having to have you like stand in the perfect spot, because like I would worry people would just never find any of them if you always have to stand in the perfect spot. But I do like the idea that there's these big landmarks of different things, and so they're either in the shape of the symbol, or there's something in the natural environment near them that indicates what the symbol is.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
I think that's yeah, I really like that a lot too. I really think that this has a lot of potential for stuff like that. There's just nothing exactly like that.
I almost. So
Like
what do you
this.
think about, like, the more we talk about it, the less I'm thinking I actually care about the farming aspect of it that
I don't
much.
really care about the farming aspect. I like it is a thing to get you from A to Z, kind of thing. Like it gives you something to do in the meantime. But I don't find that busy work. Like I would be perfectly fine if it's just a game about people exploring
I'm down for
and
collecting
traversing an
runes, but like
environment.
I don't care that much about making a farm and having little guys automate it. Little guys can do something else. Uh,
Yeah, like I think the game might work out. A more interesting version of the game might be like, okay, there is a like final puzzle to solve, and you're gonna need every rune to do it. And like you're gonna look at you start here, you look around, and you see these big interesting places that you just naturally want to go to, and so you start traveling around, looking, trying to get to these places, and you'll discover new runes there, and that like it encourages you to keep exploring, and it's just a loop of exploring and finding new runes, and like you're using these runes to traverse the environment. That's how they come in handy, uh, kind
yes.
of thing. And eventually you get to there needs to be a big final puzzle that you need to get to or do something or get to, but it could even be as simple as like, oh, you get to a mountaintop, and then you draw each rune on like a pillar, and that activates something, right?
Yeah, yeah.
The end game.
I also, just so I'm just gonna say this out loud again so I can remember that I wanted to work on it. I have to remember to I want to put in fog for the grass render distance. I'm remembering now that I originally wanted a telekinesis. So I do want there to be inventory, like containers and inventories, and I want there to be stuff you're collecting. But I think that's as far as it goes in relation to, like, survival game stuff. Like other than that, it's just like you said about traversal of the environment and how these reagents and the runes generated from the reagent. Oh, so actually, that's kind of a Dave asked this question when we were originally showing it off. Is like, what is the actual interaction between the runes and the reagents you're collecting? Because really, the thing gating the runes right now, maybe this, okay? Because I was wondering about this before. Is like the um if there's one rune that only activates in moonlight, it's weird because like sort of it's different from the rules of the other runes which just activate. But maybe it's what you draw it with that determines what activates it, and that's what comes from the
Yeah,
reagents.
that part's gonna be a little bit complicated. Yeah, complicated to figure out. Like, do we still want these? Like, the activator rune. Just if as we described the game just 2 minutes ago, the activator rune does not become as interesting. Um, you know, uh, that being said, you could have like systems where okay, two runes are connected together. Um, oh, I think that's actually what we were trying to talk. What we forgot about is
The redstone
if you have multiple strokes, when does the rune activate? Like when do you classify?
right, yes,
Uh,
yes, yes, yes.
yeah.
Okay,
So
so
like in my mind, the simplest answer is you hold the right trigger to start drawing. You draw, and then you release the right or the right mouse button, and that's like then it classifies as whatever you drew. Um,
that's
that's a
fine. We just
simple
had that's
answer.
fine. That is a simple answer. We have to teach the player that in the beginning. So the only downside to that is you have to that's something that you just have to tell the player tutorial wise, and then so that precludes so
I mean, they're gonna have to know that left click is draw too, so there will be some sort of like left right click
how do we
to this, and
what is the first thing we tell the player to draw and do though? Like what does that look like? Because if we're like
I mean, we can start at one of the sites or something, right? Or start at like a.
Because there's also a version of this game, and we don't have to do it this way, because this would be a little different, where like the player doesn't even know that it's about drawing runes and casting spells at first, right? They
Mhm.
think the drawing might be used for something else. Just who knows what? We'd have to, but that could be dangerous because they might never ever figure it out. I don't know. It's
That
like
stuff I think we'll figure out as time goes. For now, I think what we try to do is just make a cool exploration game where you can use these. Like we just make some puzzles and stuff and make some runes and just play around with what's fun. But
yeah,
like, not that it's not worth talking about, but I do think that that stuff will just come naturally later as we create the game. But there is the question of what's more. Is it fun? It may be more fun to let people just to like forego reagents and let people just draw their fucking runes, and have them activate in
that's fine if we want to make it
within the
totally
world.
about traversal, entirely about traversal,
Yeah,
and not have like. So I. But there is something to the idea of like there's
you
something
can
to
tell some interesting diegetic stories with reagents. Like the if you have to sacrifice a living being for some spells could be interesting. Like the frog thing that Dave was talking about when we were originally talking about like the bridge spell.
yeah.
Um, like that's an interesting interaction that might affect someone. Like having to draw this rune and then put something living on it. And but like maybe that's just that rune. Maybe one type of rune has reagents that it needs, and maybe it will react differently based on the reagents, and that's interesting.
I think it'll be if we want people to play the game. I do think collecting things is a thing people like rewards for exploring other than but I don't but personally but like generally people want to get a thing for exploring. People want to come across, oh look, I found this giant fruit. Now I get whatever movement speed bonus for a couple days. So
Mhm.
maybe it we could talk more about this,
So
but
yeah, that is a later game, or like game design question. But I think there will be an audience, maybe not the biggest audience, but there's going to be an audience that just wants it to be like that's the whole like if we do the collectathon thing, then that sort of it goes against
I
like
don't
the
mean
spirit of what the book
collectathon.
is,
I don't mean
or not the
collectathon.
but collectible or like upgrade path thing.
Just having items, having an inventory at all. Because
Yeah.
if it's just about traversal and we don't need items, I'm actually totally fine with that. That is a game I would rather play personally, where
I
it's
think the only item that you need is the book. Like that's how I see it. Is in the book. Like the fact that we're not giving these people a spell list once they discover a spell that they have to write it down. I think says all you need to know about the design. And maybe there is maybe the first thing people do is they discover the book, and somehow we can tutorialize them. Like maybe there is one rune drawn in the book or something already,
yeah.
and that's how it starts. Maybe it already has some drawings. Like it says, okay, hold. Like it shows you holding a crystal or something, right? That's your drawing implement, like up, and then you're drawing with your finger. And so, like the player may not. Then we don't even need to say press this button, press this button. They're gonna automatically right click and know and like hold their hand up, right? And then left click will hold their finger out, but they won't know what it means until they look at the page of the book that says, oh, like the book's paired with a crystal or whatever it is. And then all of a sudden your guy picks up the crystal in his left hand and his right hand starts to glow. He sees it back and forth glow, and then oh, I knew when I right clicked I lifted my left hand, so I'm gonna do that, and then I get into this pointing thing. It gets a little bit more diegetic than having to have any kind of text-based um,
Explanation for what to do.
explanation for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. You're right. The tutorial thing. There's lots of different ways we could do the tutorial thing. That way sounds fine to me for the first rune. I'm still not 100%. So I'm though the thing I would be sad a little bit about losing is like I don't care about farming. I don't care about there being a million different things. I don't want there to be a hunger bar, any of that. But
Mm.
I do think the well, the first thing I thought of is like if there's no reason to collect reagents to draw things, right? Then a lot of like other than maybe I guess removing trees or like trees, like what's the point? Like the idea of the fire originally in the game jam was like, oh, you're the first puzzle is gonna be you're pulling all these fruits off the trees and they're and naturally you drop some of them and they roll into the grass and they're hard to find, and the fire removes that grass and makes it so like, oh hey, this tree where I was picking berries off of a minute ago, look at all of them here now. That moment I think is neat, and I'm sad about losing that. So I would, and also the idea of like, oh, I have this container, I can cast float on it. I could pick it up and carry it, which is annoying, or I could cast float on it and telekinesis it or whatever, do all that kind of stuff. That was a neat idea.
Yeah,
So
like maybe there's like a follow spell or something, so you could do like levitate on the container and then follow on it too, and it'll do
so like
both.
there's still a part of me that wants there to be a reason to have an inventory, but I don't know what it is anymore. So I'm a less.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to play around and see. Like, I could see, you might want to erase runes, so there does make sense to be something to erase them, some way to get rid of them.
I do.
And that could be an
I would
inventory
still be
item.
down for inventory items, things that you collect that help you that help you draw runes or allow you to change the runes in some way, or maybe like I said before, maybe the when they activate is determined by the reagents you're getting, something like that. I don't know.
A telescope would just be a neat thing to have since it's an exploration-based game.
A
So you
telescope would
can
be cool.
so you could look around.
I was thinking before, like, if this is becoming a more traversal-based thing, I'm not sure I would want to do this, but like, do we want to do a thing where I don't actually want to do this, but I was thinking before, like, oh, do we give the player a model and then switch between third and first person camera so that they can run around and switch between that and drawing? But I do think just first person is better.
Yeah, first person's easier, and yeah, it is. I don't think this is a game about platforming as much as it is about solving the traversal puzzle.
Yeah, and I mean, we could still have, like, I wouldn't mind like a like like a yeah, like the it's not about wall running and jumping on things and all that, right? Yeah, it's more about casting float on yourself and then doing like I wouldn't mind like something that would have the effect of like a hook shot, but not be like, you wouldn't be running around jumping on everything, but it would just like pull you to something, just directly pull
Well,
you
you
to
can have
something,
we can have a levitate spell. We can also have a pull spell, something that just pulls you the same way the levitate
right,
does.
just the opposite.
Like a gravity
just a different,
spell,
yeah,
I
like
guess.
you're just drawing that symbol differently, right?
Yeah,
Or
gravity is what I would call it instead of levitate. Yeah. Adds gravity in that normal direction.
I do think
There should
that
also be. I'd also love there to be a music one, which if you draw music and put something inside the music rune, it'll just do a different note for every different item, every game object type.
yeah, that would also be cool. But just gonna also say this so I don't forget it. Like every rune should work, or as many runes as we can manage should work in the way like that, right? Like the symbol, like the gravity thing. Like you have one that's pushing you up, one that's pulling you towards, and the effect of it is determined by the way you draw the runes, and that's part of the puzzle, is figuring that out for some of them. So like the grow and shrink spell are the same spell. The gravity anti-gravity spell are the same spell. So on basically. If we do an animate and have little guys running around, the animate and I guess murder, or I guess maybe like petrify, like animate.
Yeah, like freeze would be that would be a good back and forth one.
But then there's got to be, maybe there's a version of that too where it's not binary, and that could be there could be even more complex symbols like I'm trying to think of a version of that has 3 outcomes. Like, this is like not a great example, but like fire doesn't have an obvious anti except for ice, right? But so you could do like fire, you know, the elements, right? Fire, ice, wind, blah blah blah. I don't really quite want to do that. I
Yeah.
think that's a little played out. But like I'm trying to think of a version of an effect that's not binary on the spectrum of how its manifestation. Whatever.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It would
We
have to be, I don't know, like something like solid, liquid, gas is the only thing I'm thinking of. Something along those lines. Uh, like change state of matter kind of spell or something. But that would be really hard to do.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I
Maybe
think, I mean, I guess you could fake it. We could do that with shaders. We could fake it with shaders.
we
Like
could, but
solid would make it sit down the ground. Liquid would just make it a liquidy, like a liquidy outline of what it is, and you could walk through it. And gas would make it float, I guess.
or maybe
Um,
this was a reveal spell you were talking about before. That might have that's something where like changing the changing the visibility of the mesh and just putting like a bunch of different shaders on it, basically, right?
mhm.
Would do like, so this shader shows all the silhouettes behind it. This shader, if you draw the symbol this way, it makes it totally transparent. If you draw this way, it brings it back to being totally opaque. If you draw it this way, whatever, like something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, there could be a lot of different things there. And I think there's yeah, we have a lot of stuff to do. I think one of the a good, also a cool thing to get people excited about this would be if we could make like a puzzle for the, like, let's say I get the, I'll try to get the, also the levitation spell, or even you could do this, honestly. It shouldn't be too difficult. Oh no, actually you'll need the normals. I'll need to update that. Um, I'll try to get the levitate stuff in to work on walls too, and then maybe we could do, like, if you could design an area in the world that we could make an actual puzzle for that.
Yeah,
Um,
hell
like
yeah.
that, we're like pretty close to that being doable right already. All I have to do is make it so that the normals are stored in the drawing.
So yeah, maybe we just come up with, so we have three symbols right now. Maybe we just come up with an area that uses those three symbols, and you have to
And
use
then
them
let
to
people play
traverse
with
it.
it,
Yeah.
right? Maybe even, and then maybe we just even play test it on Dave, who, like, you know, I won't be able to work on this too much this week because I do have a midterm and some other stuff due. But I can definitely work on it the weekend. And if Dave's gonna be ready in 2 weeks to be back to, you know, participating in this kind of stuff, then that gives us a 2 week deadline to create something, which I think is a good amount of time.
So I will probably also. So the only thing I will probably not work on it much this week either, because I would be mainly wanting to work on it next week because I do want to get my other game. I want to get some level design and stuff in my other game before the larger group plays it.
Yeah, that's
Um,
fine.
but then after that, I'm down to work on this as we can.
As we want. Yeah. Yeah. All right. I will. I have my list of things to do. I need to actually, you know what? I'm gonna write it down so I don't forget it. That's a list of things I need to do for
So okay,
school.
the three symbols though. So maybe we shouldn't do fire because maybe the fire doesn't. Well, so
Doesn't do too much for traversal right
doesn't do,
away.
yeah, right. So like maybe I think that's a whether to include the fire at all. I think comes after we decide whether we want items and stuff, because I think
Hmm.
that the fire matters more for that kind of game. So like I let the so let's do float, grow, shrink, and blank. What is the blank there?
Float, grow, shrink, and we could do.
The hidden door, the shader one wouldn't be too hard.
Yeah, we could just apply a shader to it. That wouldn't be that. But like, what would you? What? How does it help? I don't know off the top of my head.
I could try the cutting meshes thing, maybe. But like,
We could
so wait,
do.
what if the cutting meshes one, maybe to prevent the drawing around mountains thing? What if the cutting meshes one? Is there a way right now that you could also check to see if the I'll have to see how the actual like package works, but if it's simple enough to get that dictionary of the points that are making up the lines and translate that into a line to cut something, right? Then what we could do is have it so that it had to be drawn like around the whole thing and just limit like maybe the number of reagents or something, and that would be the limiting factor for why they can't do it on a mountain and just break every traversal puzzle.
Yeah, we can figure that'll be I am still interested in exploring the cave, like right, like you draw a circle around the cave. That would be cool if that did something. I don't know what that I want that to be yet, but I I'll need to figure out a way to classify that
Well, if we're
properly.
doing the redstone thing, it could be as simple as like if you're drawing, so if you're drawing on the ground outside, you could make a redstone thing that I guess this would sort of be the same thing. I guess. So like drawing a line, a redstone line that connects two runes would be like I guess you could draw it in like a big circle where the rune or a big square or whatever where the runes are within that, but then the classifier would classify it as one of those things. So maybe drawing it on the cave wall is the only way to create like an infinite redstone loop. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, cause well. Yeah, I don't know. The redstone thing is like I definitely still want it, but we don't like in the context that we're talking about it, it's not relevant without needing like an
Yeah, it
activator
would be one
rune.
of the last. It
Yeah.
would be one of the last things. So for the third rune type to get in after grow, shrink, and the floating stuff is the um. So you know, you put the float in. I could do I could do the gravity. I could do the like so the anti-float. I could do the um. I could do the grow shrink pretty easily, and then for the third thing I was thinking was maybe mesh cutting for trees and stuff like that, and cutting down a tree and then creating a rigid body like in Valheim and having it fall, and you know maybe you could run across that or something. But
Yeah, I mean that sounds neat as hell if we could get it working. But like the only problem with that being is the classifier will be inconsistent um around unless you're just drawing a symbol on something versus drawing the thing around it. Like the cutting thing sounds rad if you just do like if it's just you draw a
maybe it's
circle
just
around something and
maybe it's
it'll
just a circle. Maybe it's just a circle on something. That's fine too, right? That you just
yeah.
draw a circle on a tree. It cuts the tree like like you know horizontally related to world up, and that's it. Like maybe
Yeah,
it's just
well,
as simple as that.
yeah, well, we can figure it out. Like we could definitely do an example of it for now. But
If I can even get that
yeah,
package working. But if I can't get that one working, maybe I'll do.
yeah, we could focus on just more simple things. Like so, we have we have float, we have shrink and grow, and we could do something. Um, we could do even like bounce. We could do slide like slippery or something. We could do speed up. We could do what else is there?
How about. Oh, what about just duplicate? That's easy. Duplicate something.
Duplicate could be good. Yeah,
What's
yeah, that
what's
wouldn't be
what's the
bad.
what's the
How you activate that would be interesting.
what's the inverse of do? Oh, maybe you have to draw it like super small, or else it'll create a huge pile of
Honestly,
stuff.
there's something interesting there of like yeah, it'll create a thousand like a giant pile and but it would have to like burn out. It would have to be a spell that because like we wouldn't want to be creating stuff infinitely. But if you could do it in such a way that it would like burn out eventually, that could be
Maybe
cool.
the way you drew the symbol would determine how many duplications it performed before it burnt out or something like that.
I mean, you could just do it based on size and it'll slowly shrink.
So what is the opposite of duplicate? Combine? Like
Yeah, I
like
think duplicate and combine could be cool. And you could do a thing where like you get a bunch of apples and then like you just fill like hole with apples and now you can walk across it.
you know, now that you say that, I'm also thinking like finding stuff in the world and what it if we don't want to go with a reagent based approach and the people are collecting inventory for that reason, like if we make this a I don't want to say physicsy, but physicsy enough game, or like a systems based enough game, then the collecting the things and just the shape of them matters, right? Like what they are.
Yeah, I think that's that is interesting. Yeah, I think the duplicate
Duplicate
combined
combined. That's a good third one. So
is a cool
duplicate
thing.
combined, float. Gravity size. I don't even know what you would call the property of duplicating combination. But yeah.
Count. I don't know.
Yeah.
Gravity size and count. I guess it would be, or
Something like
resonance.
form, or yeah, it's weird.
Yeah.
Weird. But yeah, those are the three. Those are a good three.
Yeah, I think that is a good 3, and they're all pretty easy to do. Duplicate is probably slightly more complicated, just because you have to detect anything in the box, but then you're also gonna want to detect new objects. But I think that might happen automatically when they're created, so it should be fine. You might just wind up having weird, obviously exponential generation, so you'll want to make sure you have the cutoff script ready.
Also, there's a neat. I don't know. The very first thing I ever did in Unity was make a function that duplicates two things. That when I click on something, it makes two of it in the same exact position and same exact rotation. And when that happens, they actually like fly out of each other naturally. So
That's cool.
that might be if they're both rigid bodies, and that interaction right there might
Might
be,
work really well.
or like a part of the room
Then
might
it'll
be
need like
like.
a cooldown though too, because it's gonna do that like over and over again.
Well, like maybe that will just knock the things right out of the field, or maybe it's not a field based. We'll figure it out. But there's lots of ways
Yeah,
to do
I
it.
think it'll just be play around with it. I'm imagining too like the way you discover that somehow being like a I don't know something like a butterfly or a bee is flying in a pattern in the world, and then it like splits into
Splits.
two and flies off.
Yes, that's awesome. Yes. Also, this would make it so that there's two hints in the world for everything, right? There's like a place where everything's small and everything's big. There's a place where
Yeah,
bees and butterflies are the same thing, and a place where bees split. There's a place where
yeah,
like
yeah.
like that. This is neat.
I do
I
like it
like this
being
idea.
part of the natural world a lot. It makes for a lot of interesting ways to let people discover things. I think this could be it. This could be our game, the one that people actually care about and pay attention, and
Yeah.
the one that we finish.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
All right, I'm gonna go eat and uh, probably lay down and get to bed.
Sounds
But
good.
I'm also gonna write down real quick those spell types. So, grow, shrink. Just so that I know we won't, that you have it recorded, but just so I have immediate access. Uh, levitate, gravity, and duplicate, combine. Okay. All right. I will see you later.
Later.
Later.